Welcome to Future Army 20, the channel where we explore the most fascinating, rare, and innovative military technologies from the past, present, and future. Here we take a close look at the machines that changed warfare, the brilliant minds who designed them, and the legacy they left behind. Today we will go back in time to the final years of World War II to discover one of the most unusual and ahead-of-its-time aircraft ever created by Nazi Germany, the Flettner Fl 282 Kolibri. The Flettner Fl 282 Kolibri, which means hummingbird in German, was one of the first practical helicopters ever built and was far more advanced than most people realize. At a time when the concept of a helicopter was still experimental and unreliable, Germany's aviation engineers were already testing a fully operational rotary-wing aircraft that could perform reconnaissance, communication, and even light transport missions. It was developed by Anton Flettner, a visionary engineer who had already made progress with earlier helicopter designs like the FL 265. The FL 282 took those lessons and refined them into a more stable, efficient, and combat-ready aircraft. Unlike traditional airplanes that require runways, the FL 282 could take off and land vertically. This was a revolutionary concept in the 1940s and one that would not become common until decades later with helicopters like the Bell 47 or the Sikorsky series. The Kolibri used an intermeshing rotor system, also known as a syncropter design. Instead of one large rotor with a tail rotor for stability, it had two rotors set at an angle that overlapped and synchronized perfectly to avoid hitting each other. This design gave the FL 282 exceptional control and eliminated the need for a tail rotor, which simplified its mechanics. The aircraft was powered by a single 7-cylinder Brahmoshish 14A radial engine producing around 160 horsepower. This may not sound like much by modern standards, but it was enough to lift the lightweight frame of the helicopter, its pilot, and a small amount of equipment or supplies. The Kolibri could reach a top speed of about 150 kilometers per hour, with a service ceiling of around 3,000 meters. Its range was relatively short, about 300 kilometers, but that was more than enough for the reconnaissance and observation missions it was designed for. The Kolibri was originally designed to operate from naval ships, giving the German Navy an aerial eye over the sea that could spot enemy ships, submarines, or mines. Because it could take off and land vertically on small platforms, it was ideal for deployment from destroyers or other warships where space was limited. During testing, the FL 282 proved to be incredibly stable even in rough weather and could hover with impressive precision. German naval officers quickly saw its potential for spotting enemy submarines and directing naval artillery fire. By 1943, the Flettner Fl 282 was ready for production, and around 24 units were built before the war ended. There were plans for many more, but Allied bombing raids on German factories disrupted production and destroyed much of the Flettner workshop. Still, the aircraft managed to see operational use in the final years of the war. Reports suggest that several Kolibri helicopters were used on the Eastern Front for reconnaissance missions, artillery spotting, and communication between units in areas where roads and runways were destroyed. Pilots who flew the Kolibri described it as surprisingly reliable and easy to control compared to other early helicopters. Its compact size and maneuverability made it ideal for battlefield observation, and it could hover silently above the front lines, giving commanders real-time intelligence on enemy movements. However, its light frame also made it vulnerable to gunfire, and it had no armor or defensive weaponry. As a result, it was mainly used in roles where it could stay behind friendly lines. After the war, several captured examples of the FL 282 were studied by Allied forces, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. Engineers were astonished at how advanced the design was for its time. In fact, many of the principles and lessons from the Kolibri influenced early post-war helicopter development in the West. The intermeshing rotor concept continued to inspire later helicopters such as the Cayman Husky, which used a similar mechanism for stable and efficient flight. The FL-282 represents one of those rare cases where German engineering was far ahead of its time but could not reach its full potential because of the war's outcome. Had the war continued or had the aircraft been produced in larger numbers, it might have changed how reconnaissance and coordination were handled on the battlefield. The helicopter could have given the German military a tactical advantage in observing enemy positions, rescuing wounded soldiers, or transporting critical supplies to isolated areas. Another fascinating aspect of the Kolibri was its modular design. Some versions featured an enclosed cockpit for bad weather, while others had an open frame for better visibility. A few experimental versions were even designed to carry small bombs or machine guns, though these were never used in combat. The adaptability of the design shows how far Anton Flettner and his team were thinking ahead. They were already envisioning helicopters as multi-role platforms long before that became a standard concept in modern militaries. Unfortunately, as the war turned against Germany and resources became scarce, helicopter production was no longer a priority. Many prototypes were destroyed in bombings or scrapped after the war. Only a few partial remains of the FL-282 survive today, preserved in museums as a reminder of how far technology had come even during the most chaotic times of history. The legacy of the Flettner FL-282 lives on not just as a relic of World War II but as a symbol of innovation under extreme pressure. It marked the transition from theoretical rotorcraft to practical helicopters and demonstrated that vertical flight was possible in real-world combat conditions. Anton Flettner himself later moved to the United States, where his knowledge contributed to American helicopter advancements. The ideas born in his German workshop laid the groundwork for the helicopter revolution that transformed both military and civilian aviation in the decades that followed. When we look back today, it is easy to see how remarkable the Flettner FL-282 Kolibri really was. In an era dominated by propeller-driven planes and bombers, this small and delicate machine quietly introduced a new form of flight. It may not have been built in large numbers, but its influence can still be traced through every modern helicopter flying today. The Kolibri proved that hovering, vertical takeoff, and precise maneuvering were not just dreams but achievable realities. That concludes our look into one of the most unique and visionary aircraft of World War II. The Flettner FL-282 Kolibri remains a fascinating example of human creativity, engineering brilliance, and the drive to explore new frontiers in aviation. If you enjoyed learning about this extraordinary helicopter and want to discover more stories about military technology from around the world, make sure to subscribe to Future Army 20. We bring you weekly videos exploring the weapons, vehicles, and inventions that shape the history of warfare and continue to influence the future of defense. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the hidden innovations of the past and the cutting-edge technologies of tomorrow.